the Sahel, long live. Long live. Forward to Pan-Africanism, forward. Forward. Forward to socialism, forward. Forward. Comrades, revolutionary critics. My name is Vuyolwethu Toli. We said we're aiming for half-past, but I think given that majority of delegation is already here, comrades, I think we mustn't waste time and try to. Other comrades, of course, they will try to join us as we're moving along. And welcome, comrades, to all comrades who are here. Am I audible even at the back there? There's no funny echo or something like that. Okay. Thanks a lot, comrade. My name is Vuyolwethu Toli, as I've already explained. I'm the NUMSA Head of the Education Department, National Union of National Workers of South Africa. And was given the task to facilitate today's discussion, which looks at the question of the Sahel developments that have been unfolding in front of your eyes, we have been witnessing in terms of what is happening. So today's session, you've seen the advert, the way that we line it up is that there's actually a program that includes this dossier by Tricontinental, the Sahel Seeks Sovereignty. For each chair that comrades are sitting on, they would have left this document comrade for you. It was part of what we're discussing today, the question of sovereignty, then the title of the public lecture or the talk or the discussion that we have is the question of Sahel and how it is pursuing this sovereignty. Now, to help us, or first of all, we have our speakers who will be helping us. I will introduce the comrades. The speakers who will be helping us to unpack, comrade, the topic that we are dealing with. But I think it's also important to acknowledge, yes, we have comrades who are introducing them, but to acknowledge the organizations and yourselves, comrade, who have attended, comrade from our S.M.G, the Sheikh Dwellers movement. I see that comrade are already in the venue, and maybe some of the cadres are still coming. We have comrades from the National Union of National Workers of South Africa, from the regions, including ourselves from the regions within Gauteng, and hopefully those who are also having a Facebook comrade where people can connect and check the discussion. So I know those organizations are also there, but other organizations are also represented. We do also have Ambassador. I know the comrade from Venezuela. There's other organizations, for instance, the SASCO, the student movement, there's academics, the students, and broader working class, and all the masses that found this topic interesting. To deal with the topic properly and to unpack, we have two of our comrades who will help us. Comrade Mikaela Nhondo Erskog, who is a researcher with the Tricontinental Institute. She'll be joining us virtually, as you see, so that hybrid arrangement, so that she can be able to speak, and hopefully she will be audible, comrade. And she will help us because also she, in terms of this Sahel dossier that we're dealing with today, they will have played a critical part, as you see that is produced by the Tricontinental. We also have comrade Kwesi Pratt Jnr, comrade, joining us from the Socialist movement of Ghana. He's the General Secretary of the Socialist movement of Ghana, and also an author. Forgive me, comrade Kwesi, I don't know the book fully, but an author of the reparations. There's a book that has been released, and I'm sure it might find connection with this discussion insofar as the reparations question on the African continent was one of the burning questions. And comrades, the way that we proceed from now is that we have a cultural intervention. So speakers are going to get 15 minutes once we come to them to unpack the topic, the Sahel Seeks Sovereignty, and I'll get a little bit in terms of grounding, a context with this topic. But we will also have a cultural interlude. We have our comrade Simpo, Lawrence Phakathi, comrade from JC Bez, the Shopsteward from JC Bez Region, Artimangasana local from NUMSA. He has an item that I think it will be worth it for comrades to listen to and just to reflect. It will help also just to ground us to what we are. So he will have that for 5 minutes, and then from then on, we'll go to our speakers who will help us to unpack the concept. Comrade Mika will come in first because I spoke about this dossier. And I think at this point it's very important, before I allow Comrade Phakathi first, to also mention probably a little bit, as I indicated, you would have witnessed events either from 2021, yes, before that, but concretely in terms of what we're dealing with, the dossier and the question of the Sahel as the struggle continues to unfold there. From 2021 series, if you talk of the sequence of the coup, the popular coups, as you've seen in Mali, Burkina Faso, and also in Niger. And this event we're also hosting it in the context when in 2023 the 3 states in the Sahel will have, after wanting to pursue a path to dependence that is defined by themselves, they will have then set an agenda, the two of them, and the comrades will also talk to this particular issue, the importance of the 16th of September 2023, and why, for instance, this event is a build-up to 16th of September 2025 this year, why it's important in the mobilisations and the solidarity question. I'm not going to talk much, but it's very important to understand the Sahel, that the context in which it is happening. I mean, we're not short of statistics in the African continent in terms of the dire state of the continent, the backwardness, and being impoverished. It was not so long ago when I think it was Oxfam in 2020 or so, when they released to see that the 22, and it was in the context of COVID, the world's richest 22 people owned more wealth than the rest of 325 million African women combined. And this year, also Oxfam produced another report painting a very big picture insofar as status of ownership. 4 males in the continent own more wealth than the rest of the 750 million people combined. That is half the population, if you count in terms of 1.5 billion. The Sahel, in that context, if you were to zoom in that region, what gives, what gave effect to the popular uprisings and ultimately seizure of power in the manner that you would have witnessed? What has been the program of the Sahel? What is the context in which the struggles in the Sahel have unfolded from in the broader context of colonialism and neocolonialism? And in the context, I'll just end with what Comrade Kwame Nkrumah, the Osadefo, would have mentioned in the text, neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, that in the continent we're facing a paradox, that on one hand, the mineral wealth beneath the soils, but also then on the other, the question of poverty, the backwardness, lack of sovereignty, and all sorts of other dependencies that trap the continent into the state that it is. Without talking too much, as I've outlined, our speakers will have 15 minutes in that order. Comrade Nika will come, Comrade Kwesi will come, and then from there, we are going to open to yourself, because you are part of this discussion, you must also reflect, but please, we must be guided. In the interest of time, we can't be talking too long, so we'll have to measure each speaker fully. I know it's not a popular thing, but at least 2 to 3 minutes of the maximum, so that others can also speak. It's in the evening, and our speakers, some of them joining us, it could be too late where they are. So we'll take Comrade Phakathi now to come through. He's going to give us the interlude. The team is going to assist in terms of sound. We'll hear from there, from Comrade Phakathi. We allow the discussion now insofar as the dossier and the broader question of anti-imperialist struggle and how the Sahel is actually positioning itself, pursuing that agenda that still remains undealt with by most of us in the country. Comrade Phakathi, come through. Welcome, Comrade. Yes, yeah, already introduced Comrade Lawrence Phakathi from JC Bez Region, NUMSA, the Shopsteward.
Good evening, comrades.
Good evening,
my name is Lawrence Phakathi from JC Bez, a secretary in a local called RT Mondisan.
Burkina Faso, land of the upright.
Captain Traore, I speak for the soul of Sankara Stew. Burkina Faso, land of the brave and cool. Captain Traore, flames in his eyes, storms through the fire, met the eagle rock. No tail, it's imperialized. New master, all face the same disguise. The one born to steal the soul, but we got our goal where the river flows. Say now, keep the colony out. Now the youth stand tall, the feast full of clouds. Flash through God, the people breathe, the air of the free. No empire of each, we close sometimes we good. But we keep proud, it's all the suit. No more stages on the felony deeds. We run our throat, some kind of sleep. GDP rise, we self state, from Congo field to help again. It's equality is the fight. We let get started in the dead of the night. Sometimes goes in the bullet vein. A future care from the rebels' heart. AES, brother, Lincoln Free. Mali, Niger, we chant my name. Like a dawn from a Sahel sand. We the travelers fire and the Sankara sand. No more change, no more disguise. This is an Africa stand. We claim the skies. We rise like a dawn from a Sahel sand. We the travelers fire and the Sankara stand. No more change, no more disguise. This is an Africa stand. We claim the skies. Empire fears the youth the lands. We funnel deep, wireless e-bands. We know that we beat the teeth. We close hands to the mind of reach. No Iron Man fleece, no worries to take. We care about faith, we choose our state. From Anunu to Awula East. We know the dreams that the road keeps. We know that the dreams post in the streets. We trade in strength, the power and kings. Have for the people, tech and schools. We get the games of the rules. This is where the minds are seen the high and raised. We want 10,000 high and brave. There's got space in every street. His vision dancing in every beat. No one is gold, no more holding hands. But our people remain as dead. No more smiles today. African don't want to fade away. We rise like a dawn from a Sahel sand. We the cloud is fire and the sun gonna stand. No more change, no more disguise. It's an Africa stand. We claim the skies. We rise like a dawn from a Sahel sand. We the cloud is fire and the sun gonna stand. No more change, no more disguise. It's an Africa stand. We claim the skies. This is an peace that hides the pain. It's justice rolling through the rain. They flow in shade. Fast, no evil John, we are staying here. No sweets are kind, no secret deeds. Our leaders walk with open ease. From our Wuga to Kenya's faith. The Quran is one, is all the same. This revolution won't be tamed, it's not for sale. It can't be named from Palestine to Soweto Street. We find our own tender beat. No one wants one beat. Our proud people, we don't bleed greed. No focus race, no mental truth. But the last goes in the hands of the youth. To tell the world, they will be scorned. We walk as men, we speak as one. Burkina Faso, the spark, the start of this continent with rebel stars. We rise like a dawn from a Sahel sand. We the travelers fire and the sun gonna stand. No more change, no more disguise. It's an Africa stand. We claim the skies. We rise like a dawn from a Sahel sand. We the travelers fire and the sun gonna stand. No more change, no more disguise. We stand. We claim the skies.
Thanks for that, comrades. I hope that you were listening in terms of his grounding of today's discussion. Now, before I hand over to Comrade Mika, just as I mentioned, Comrade, that today's program is as a result of joint efforts, coordination, Pan-Africanism Today, part of the organization that would have led in terms of the spearheading, Tricontinental, in terms of the, you see this dossier that Comrade Mika is actually going to delve into. Now, also the anti-fascist international, the South African chapter, the Forges, am I forgetting him? International People's Assembly as well, and I really appreciate and I hope that you join us in dealing with, because you see all the contradictions in the world as they are sharpening. I mean, the question of fascism, whether you're going to Gaza, you're going to how the offensives are being launched against countries, popular countries in Latin America, Venezuela, and so on and so forth, Cuba and all that. And the Sahel was zooming into the Sahel, but we're not disconnecting to the broader questions around anti-imperialism and the struggle waged by the working class, peasants, and all the oppressed and exploited people coming around them. But our focus and where we're really looking for this opportunity to delve deeper and draw inspiration is to look at the question of the Sahel as it has been unfolding. And some of the comrades I know have been saying, it's long overdue for us to have this discussion. Comrade Mika, over to you. We'll have some 15 minutes to do the intervention. Take us through the dossier. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Comrade Vuyolwethu. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, are you nodding?
Yes. Yes, I can hear you, Mika. You're audible.
Well, comrades, I'm happy to be here. I feel super honored to be joining you. I actually miss many of you. I'm sorry that I can't be there in South Africa at this moment, but thank you for taking the time to discuss this very important topic. And I can see the comrades right now, but can you lift? I see people have the dossier, eh?
Yeah.
Can anyone show it to me by lifting it up so I can just see if folks have it there? Yes, okay. Nice one. Thank you. So I'm going to briefly go into this, and nice to see you, Vuyo, nice to see you, Kwesi, nice to see the comrades, and thanks to all the organizers and the sponsor organizations for making sure this event happened in such a timely fashion. Since 16 September will be 2 years since the formal creation of the Confederation of the Alliance of Sahel States. So number one, this text is not comprehensive, it's not an encyclopedia, it's not the total picture, but it is supposed to be a reference document of what are the key events that have happened, what are the key things that are at stake, how it relates to the Pan-African struggles, and also how do we start to build a kind of collective understanding over why this is an important project. What does it mean to seek sovereignty? What does it mean to align with a military-led government, given the fact that, and I was reading State and Revolution today by Lenin, where he says, ultimately, the army is an arm of coercion for the monopoly of violence for a state. Can it be otherwise, he asks. Is there another way? And so that's a question that a lot of people have, if the military can operate otherwise. So the dossier has, I think, 3 main elements that I think help our organizations to educate ourselves, to create debate, and to think about the moment. Is one, we tried and we discussed this with Comrade Kwesi, other comrades in WAPO, the West African People's Organization, comrades in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, is how do we recover the historical memory and make sure we have a long historical understanding of why this is happening now? And so we have in the beginning a little bit of the kind of timeline of the recent history, but then we also look at the long history and show how from the World War II, where West African soldiers went to fight in, as the cooks, as the chefs, as the kind of supporting brigade, were politicized that we need to struggle for independence, to the fact that there was a betrayal of independence in a lot of the Francophone Africa, where we see in the case of Niger that we tried to highlight the agreements that were made just after independence in 1960, 1961. The agreements essentially recaptured resources, sovereignty and territory. And one of them we highlight was the 1961 Defense Agreement, where essentially France made Niger hand over their uranium and through subtle ways ensured that the economic and financial policy of the country was tied to certain French military goals and interests. We also look at how sovereignty, can basically never be handed, as many of you know, can never be handed, but has to be seized. The second part is that we try to frame the AES not just as part of the many coups that have happened in Africa. Since 1950, at least 40 out of 54 African countries have experienced coups. African countries are over 50% of global coups. And it's always seen as this kind of random power grab, elite interest. But we try to frame it more around the question of what are the conditions that produce a lack of social organizations and public institutions where coups naturally will end up filtering through because of the lack of state capacity. And we also look at it in terms of the coups are not just random, they also come in the fact that there's a vacuum of organization where popular uprisings have been happening for decades, but if we look at the recent history, Burkina Faso in 2014, then in Senegal in 2017, there have been a series of popular uprisings, as all the comrades here know, in all our countries, but in the absence of an organization that is disciplined, that has hierarchy, right now the military came up as the best option, but that is not without conditions. We spoke to the comrades in Niger and they said last year in July, when the coup happened, when the bases were surrounded of the French military, when the agenda was set to expel the French military, it came from popular demands. It didn't come exactly directly from coup leaders, but when they saw they were getting mass support, they also have to subordinate their own interests to that of the masses if they want to be sustainable. And so we try to complicate this narrative that coups are just about power grabs and see what the interplay between the popular organizations. And I remember there was an international conference of solidarity with the Sahel last year in November, and one of the student leaders said something along the lines of, "We will support you as long as you support and advance the interests of the popular masses. But if you betray us, we'll fight you like we fought colonialism." So there is this open dialogue in the sense of you have to have some sense of accountability. And then the last point is, we wanted to also open up some debate around this question because we know due to language barriers, technological limitations, economic limitations, we don't necessarily get to interact one-on-one with a lot of these organizations. And part of the IPA, the International People's Assembly, the West Africa People's Organizations, have been trying to build these networks that we can have a more close grassroots level discussion, and we try to reflect a little bit about that. So this document is just a reference, but there are also some issues that are still unresolved. The question of whether or not the military leaders will follow through, whether or not the AES will institutionalize some of the grassroots demands and participation is still up for grabs. But we also try to highlight the fact that significant measures have been made to wrestle back sovereignty and control, not only of resources. In the last few years, we've seen the mining codes being changed, but also a lot of social, cultural, ideological work has been done where earlier this year there was a big festival in Mali bringing together Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali cultural workers and artists. Recently there was a bank of the Confederation that was launched. There have been discussions about currency. There have been discussions and pursuits about a common passport, common telecommunications network. So there's a real aim at integration, which is very necessary because part of the scramble for Africa that really put us and set us a step back is the balkanization of the continent meant that we can't unite our regions and therefore build economies of scale that can then overcome some of the developmental issues that we are currently dealing with. So we try to foreground some of those issues and select. It's hard to make a... They are on different paths. Burkina Faso has Thomas Sankara. Mali has, the socialist period of Modibo Keita. Niger had a group that were heavily, Sawaba, were heavily repressed in the 1960s. So the class struggle is at different levels. But the fact that they're making an effort, regardless of what your assessment of the individual leaders, this is still a concrete leap and a level of courage. And I don't know if comrades know this quote by Sankara. He says something about how transforming society takes a level of madness, and you have to kind of have a bit of non-conformity and dare to invent the future. But our organizations need to figure out when Ibrahim Traore is citing Thomas Sankara. This is an important opening, an opportunity for us to push the working class agenda, the progressive agenda, because he's given us a space in which we can now insert ourselves. And that's part of what this intervention of this text is. And as many of you know, the struggles they face are similar to the ones we face, but we've not seen such decisive steps of ejecting the French military, ejecting and breaking relationships with US military, and explicit citations and advancements of anti-imperialist aims on the continent, and we know that that's important to defend in this particular moment when the world is more divided than ever. And the last point I'll share is that we went and decided to do this at a time in which last year in January we launched a text called Hyper-Imperialism, which we tried to have a serious conjunctural analysis based on various consultations with people in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, trying to assess really what is the moment we're living in, who is the true enemy of progress and who is not. And part of it was that we see these groupings like the Sahel, like Russia, like others, who are fighting for their sovereignty and fighting for an alternative. And we think it's important to continue to assess it and be aware of the real limitations, but we nonetheless have to see the tree from the forest in terms of who the real enemy of progress is right now when nuclear threats are very, very, very real. So I think I'll end there, and I'm excited to hear from Comrade Kwesi and to hear from everyone in the audience.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mika, for that input. Walking us through the dossier, of course, and I understand that maybe some of the cadres might be receiving. Today, it will give you, comrade, an opportunity as you go back also to continue to read it and discuss it in your PDFs and other discussion forums that you have. I will now have comrade, building up from what Mika was saying, comrade Kwesi, good to have you. As I indicated when I introduced, the comrade Kwesi is a general secretary for the Socialist movement of Ghana, and also has written a book, and hopefully we find access to it, Reparations, History, Struggle, Politics, and Law. So Comrade Kwesi is going to zoom into this question. As Mika was walking us through, Comrade Mika was walking us through the dossier. There's also other things, thematically, Comrade Kwesi, questions of sovereignty, contradictions that the popular people were responding to, and perhaps what are some of the concrete programmatic, as the process is unfolding, what are the programmatic insights for the rest of the continent? Because as Mika was saying, the benefit not only to the Sahel, but it raises burning questions insofar the unfinished business of the struggle that as African people will still have to wage. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Well, comrades and friends, first of all, let me clarify this. I'm not here because I'm an expert on the Sahel, or that I know better than all of you who have assembled here this evening. I'm here because I'm frightened. I'm here today because I'm deeply worried about the state of the world and what is likely to happen. We are living in a world which is about to be extinguished forever. And that is something that has to be present in our minds. We are living in a world in which a few countries have acquired weapons of mass destruction capable of destroying this world 10 times over. Destroying the world once is enough, but we have built up weaponry which will destroy this world 10 times over. And if we allow that to happen, the world as we know it today would not exist. Our dreams will perish, our societies will perish, we will perish, everything will perish. And we have a responsibility to stop that from happening. And that is why I'm here today. Now the question is, how is the Sahel linked to this picture that I'm painting? And it's very simple. What will bring the world to an end, what will destroy civilization, is the hunger in our society, the oppression in our society, the divisions in our society amongst ourselves, the lack of access to health and so on, the struggle over who should control wealth, who should own the wealth of the world, and so on, is what ultimately will trigger the nuclear weapons which will destroy all of us. And we have a duty to ourselves and to generations not yet born to work together in order to build an entirely new world. An entirely new world of equal citizens, an entirely new world in which hunger is banished, an entirely new world in which all of us will work together, hold ourselves shoulder to shoulder, and construct a new world in which no child will go to bed on an empty stomach. That is the challenge facing us, and that is the challenge of the Sahel. Now, a lot of people talk about sovereignty and so on. In concrete terms, what does it really mean? We don't have to forget that the world as we know it today did not come about by accident. It was carefully constructed over centuries. And you can go back to the beginning of history. But I'd like to start from 1452. In 1452, the Pope, and I mean the Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, issued a law commonly known as the Paper Bull, in which he declared our lands as vacant lands and declared our people uncivilized, and authorized King Alfonso of Portugal to go into the world and civilize us. And that if we resisted their civilization, they had the authority of the Pope to kill us, to seize our wives and property, and to take over our lands. Of course, you do know that we have progressed from there, and we came to the era of slavery, especially the transatlantic slavery, where we, our forebears, the doctors amongst us, the engineers amongst us, the strong amongst us, were captured as beasts of burden and worked in order to accumulate the resources which today is the foundation of capitalism, which is the foundation of the so-called industrialized and modernized West, and so on. And then, of course, colonialism, under which we continue to work as beasts of burden and gain nothing from our neighbor. Today, if you look around all of the African countries, without exception, and you look at national infrastructure is constructed in such a way as to facilitate the removal of wealth from our land to be deposited in the colonial metropolis. So, for example, if you come to Ghana, where I come from, the railway lines all start from areas where we produce gold and end up in the ports. They start from the diamond producing areas, they end up in the ports. They start from the timber producing areas, they end up in the ports, and so on. That was the era in which we were denied the right to select our own leaders. So it was that under colonialism, the head of state was appointed for us by the Queen of England, and we had no right to choose our own head of state. To the extent that even municipal and district chief executives were appointed from the colonial metropolis. But it gets worse, and it has not ended. There's a lot of talk about currency in Francophone West Africa, and as a reason for the uprisings that are taking place in many of the Francophone West African states. It is simple. All French-speaking former colonial colonies, or former colonial possessions of France, are enjoined to deposit all of their foreign reserves in the Central Bank of France. Now, what does that mean? It means that African countries, French-speaking African countries, actually sometimes have to borrow their own money and pay interest on their own money that they have borrowed. This situation is completely untenable. It doesn't make sense. It has to change. You take the case of a country like Niger. Niger is rich in gold, it's rich in uranium, and so on. Indeed, if you go to France today, 1/3 of the electricity generated in France is generated with uranium from Niger. And yet, the vast majority of the people of Niger have no access to electricity. This is the problem. You understand? In spite of the enormous resources that Niger had, Niger was counted as one of the 3 poorest countries in the world. One of the 3 poorest countries in the world. 1 year after the coup d'etat, Niger became the fastest growing economy in the world. Something must explain this situation. Something ought to explain this situation. Now, what is happening? Do not let us deceive ourselves. A military coup is essentially a conspiracy. A military coup is not the equivalent of a popular uprising. It's a conspiracy. And this should explain why Thomas Sankara, a respected revolutionary leader, was killed so very early in his life by one of the people who was involved in the conspiracy to stage the coup d'etat who brought Sankara to power. Because it is a conspiracy, it does not involve mass mobilization. It involves trusted friends, people who relate to them on the basis of trust other than the other conspirations that we know about. So it was that Blaise Compaoré became the most trusted friend of Sankara because they were like brothers. They went to school together. They joined the army together. They thought that they would look each other's back and so on. But it turned out that Blaise Compaoré did not share the revolutionary aspirations of Sankara and the people of Burkina Faso, and sold himself out and led a counter coup which led to the death of Thomas Sankara. Mika has told us about the experiences in Niger and other places, and they are very significant experiences. For example, in Niger, the expulsion of the French military was not done by the military. It was done by the popular forces who took advantage of the coup, besieged the French embassy, besieged the French garrison, and starved them to the point that they could no longer stay and had to leave. The military had to toe the line. So that one must be very, very clear. It's not like some bunch of military men took power and decided to drive away the French forces and so on. That's not what happened in Niger. Of course, we have to understand the case of Mali and its history. In Mali, for example, after the momentum for independence of the continent of Africa started gathering with speed, with force and so on, led by Kwame Nkrumah, the French were compelled to give the people of their colonies 2 options: to break away and become independent, or to remain under the hegemony of France, the control of France. But if they decided to be independent, the option the French gave them was that they would withdraw everything that they had built and so on. So what happened? Guinea decided to take the path of independence. The French immediately took out everything, including paper and pencil that they had used for the administration, in order to strangulate the newly independent Guinea and force them into submission. And so it was that it was the Nkrumah government who decided to give the new Guinean government £10 million in order to enable it to stabilize and so on. Now, it is important for us, those of us who think that coup d'etats are bad, and that what they call democracy is necessarily better than coup d'etats and so on, to think. Nika told us that there have been more than 200 coup d'etats in Africa. In fact, Africa has had 50% of the coup d'etats around the world. But what coup d'etats were they? All the coup d'etats are not the same. As a matter of fact, most of the coup d'etats until recently were organized, engineered, and carried through by the forces of reaction under the direction of the imperialist states, the United States of America, Britain, Belgium, and so on. They were the people who were organizing coup d'etats on our continent. And we cannot forget the story of the Congo. We cannot forget the overthrow of the government of Patrice Lumumba by a combination of the forces of Western intelligence, including Britain, including the United States of America, including Belgium, and so on. We cannot forget that. Now, why did they overthrow the government of Lumumba? They overthrew the government of Lumumba simply because they thought that Lumumba was left and radical, and that if they did not overthrow Lumumba, the uranium resources of the Congo would end up in the hands of the Soviet Union. Now, there's something very significant about the coup in the Congo. After overthrowing Patrice Lumumba, they did not let him go. They killed him. They assassinated him. They did not just assassinate him, they removed his front teeth, which the killers kept as souvenir until today. Now, that's how barbaric they were. And of course, you know the story of the overthrow of the Nkrumah government in Ghana. Until recently, it was a criminal offense in Ghana to be seen holding Nkrumah's photograph, printing Nkrumah's photograph, or distributing Nkrumah's photograph. They used brute and crude force in order to prevent us from liberating ourselves. So when today they persuade ECOWAS, they persuade the African Union and others to impose sanctions on the Sahel States because they've staged coup d'etats and so on, remind them of their own roles in staging coup d'etats all over the world, including the coup d'etat in Chile, which led to the murder of Salvador Allende. The coup d'etat is not the weapon of dictators alone. The coup d'etat is not the weapon of power-hungry Africans. It has been a weapon in the hands of the Western powers, and they have used this weapon anytime it has suited them. Now, today, all of us are being told that there is some democratic practice that we must all adhere to, and that if we do not adhere to that democratic practice, we will never develop. First and foremost, we have to understand how the Western countries, the capitalist countries, came to their current level of development. We have to understand that. And if we understand that, we would not make the mistake of copying them because it is not possible to copy them today. And why do I say this? They gained the capital that they used in order to build their empires and so on from slavery. So if they want us to follow the example today, they should tell us which countries we can also go and capture their people to work for us as beasts of burden for hundreds of years without pay. That option is not available to us. Don't listen to them, because what they tell you to do is impossible. You cannot enslave other people in order to steal their resources for your development. We also today cannot go out there and colonize other people, take over their mineral wealth, take over their manpower and so on, and use that for our development. It's impossible. And the neocolonialism of today, under which colonialism has been disguised, and which enables us to control our resources, is not possible with us today. So our only option for breaking out of poverty, for breaking out of exploitation and oppression today in Africa, is the path of independent, self-reliant development in union. That is why Pan-Africanism is important today. That is the only option available to us. So, those who believe that they must necessarily oppose what is happening in the Sahel because it is not democratic as prescribed by the West are completely lost. And it's time for them to retrace their steps to reality. In any case, the democracy they ask us to practice, do they practice it? Take the United States of America. There are a number of parties. There's the Republican Party, there's the Democratic Party, there are other smaller parties and so on. But is that a multi-party state? It doesn't matter whether you elect a Democratic president or elect a Republican president, they will all bomb Afghanistan. It doesn't matter whether you elect a Democratic president or a all tighten the sanctions on Cuba. They will tighten the blockade on Cuba. They will strangulate the Cuban people in the hope that they would achieve reversals of the Cuban Revolution. So don't be deceived. That multi-party state is a facade. In reality, the United States of America is dominated by those who control capital. And they themselves tell us that only 2% of their population control 98% of their resources. How is that a democracy? So we should not be deceived by what they tell us, and we should look at our own conditions. Today, as we speak here about the Sahel, it's also an opportunity to examine ourselves and to see what role we can play in order to stabilize not just the Sahel states, but to learn the important lessons of the Sahel states so that we can move forward in unity towards development. And I'm particularly sad about some developments in the Republic of South Africa. Very, very deeply worried about these developments. This xenophobic trend which is developing here, where is the sense in it? Where is the sense in it? The resources of South Africa are not being taken to build Nigeria. The Barclays brothers, who established the Barclays Bank with slave money, are not from Uganda. They are not from Zimbabwe. Why are we fighting amongst ourselves? All of us are victims of imperialism. All of us are victims of capitalism. All of us are victims of this international order which continues to make us hewers of wood and drawers of water. That xenophobia will divide us. It will make brother kill brother, sister kill sister, and weaken us so that those who control the levers of power and wealth on our continent will continue to control the levers of power and wealth to our disadvantage. To stand for the working people of Africa, the working people of the world, to unite, to fight the common enemy, and the common enemy is capital. The common enemy is capital, and we need to unite in order to smash capital so that we can begin to build that new society. The new society which will be based on the principles of equality and so on. And that is the example of the Sahel. Something significant has happened in the Sahel. A lot of people are talking about the mineral wealth, which the new governments are taking hold of, and so on and so on. For me, the most important thing that has happened in the Sahel is the agreement by the three states that if you touch one, you touch all. That's the most important development. That makes us stronger. That says that we should unite. We should build an Africa in which any affront to South Africa is an affront to Nigeria. And any affront to Nigeria is an affront to Ghana. That is that new Africa which will bring us hope and prosperity. Not an Africa in which South Africans are chasing Nigerians, Nigerians are chasing Burundis, and so on. That kind of Africa will collapse on the basis of division and its weaknesses. It's about time we learn the important lessons of the Sahel and work together as people who face a common situation of oppression and exploitation. Don't let us forget that the struggle against apartheid in South Africa was successful because many people from around the world made tremendous sacrifices to make that happen. Don't forget the blood of Cuban internationalists, which was shed in the Battle of Tricontinental, which liberated Angola, consolidated Angola's independence, which led to the independence of Namibia, and which led to surrounding the apartheid forces and compelling the apartheid regime to come to the negotiation table. Don't forget that. And if you don't forget that, you cannot exhibit the xenophobic tendencies that we are seeing in the streets of Johannesburg and other places in Africa. Today, we are confronted with many problems. One of the problems we are confronted with is simply the fact that countries in our continent, African people, have a burden of debt. The debt is piling. If you come to Ghana, in the electricity sector alone, our indebtedness is to the tune of $3 billion US. $3 billion US. The IMF and the World Bank gave us the same $3 billion for 3 years. That $3 billion, if you pump it into the electricity sector, it will finish. It will not even solve the problem. It will just to pay debt. It's not about how to construct the electricity sector and so on. So let us wake up. Look, today, every now and then, and that's one of the major problems that the Sahel States are likely to face. The Sahel States are not indemnified from the struggles of other independent states. They suffer death. A blockade is being imposed on them. They cannot continue to export. Niger is having a lot of difficulty exporting its oil to China as a result of this senseless blockade that has been imposed upon them and so on. They are being squeezed to the point where they will become desperate, and in the hope that they become so desperate as to go to the IMF and the World Bank to look for salvation. That's where the problem is. Because there is no salvation which will come to us from the World Bank. There's no salvation which is going to come to us from the International Monetary Fund. And can I explain? I know that we don't have a lot of time, but let me explain. Look, at the time the United Nations was being established, Ghana was not a state. It was not recognized as a sovereign state. South Africa was not a sovereign state. All of us were colonies. Okay? And that is why the United Nations for a very long time did not have more than 50 members. Check. For a very long time, the United Nations did not have more than 50 members because we didn't qualify as states to become members of the United Nations. So the institutions that were set up in the UN mechanism for resolving conflict and so on, was all done in order to protect the colonial metropolis who were not there when the IMF and the World Bank were being established. Because they were established to pursue the interests of Britain, of Germany, of France, of the United States of America. So our unthinking leaders, our backward leaders in Africa, the house niggas who are taking power in Africa, ought to wake up and learn our history and learn it well. Otherwise, they will continue to lead us into ditch every time as they have done over many years. And our leaders have been told in plain language that today on the continent of Africa, there is no leader who is even half as popular as Ibrahim Traoré. Why? They say they believe in democracy. Democracy is the expression of the will of the people. How many of our leaders can wake up and walk the streets of Johannesburg without 100 bodyguards? What are they afraid of? Because they know they are unpopular. They know that they are unpopular. Only yesterday, I saw one of our leaders going to a function in his or her own country in a convoy of almost 200 cars. My goodness, 200 cars. Why? They are afraid of their own people. They know they are unpopular, and they are teaching us democracy. They are teaching us democracy. So this question of democracy is democracy and not. Let the facts speak for themselves. Let the reality speak for itself. I dare any African leader to engage in any contest which involves voting by the people with Traoré and let's see who is going to win. They cannot win against Traoré. He's more popular. And that is the basis of democracy. The acceptance of the people, the choice of the people. And in spite of the fact that these young guys came to power through coup d'etats, who will contest their popularity? That's the issue. The issue is not the form of government, just the form of government. The issue is what you are delivering. The issue is whether you are able to solve the problems of hunger that afflict our people. The issue is whether our people have access to medical care. The issue is whether our people have access to decent housing. The issue is whether our people are part of the processes of making decisions about themselves. And no African country, as far as I know, has done better than those 3 countries in the Sahel. Comrades and friends, let's continue the discussion.
Thank you very much, Comrade Kwesi, for that powerful intervention. And to you, Comrade Mika, as well. Thanks very much, Comrade Kwesi. It is opening up. Also for yourself, Comrade, now we're going to get to the discussion. If there are any cadres who are only joining us later, welcome, comrades. It's a very rich discussion. We are unpacking the question of the Alliance of the Sahel States. You would have witnessed what has unfolded. Even, I like comrades traced it historically, this question, in terms of the coups. And there are many coups in the African continent. But what is the qualitative difference of what we have seen? And comrades, here we have organizations, working class organizations, organized labor, NUMSA and other formations that could be belonging to COSATU and other federations. We do have student organizations as well that are coming from the institutions of higher learning. They also represent the interests of the working class student in these institutions. We also have Abasali Basanjondo, the shared dollars movement, fighting for the question of land, and some of the dignity housing and so forth. And all other working class groups, if I don't mention the section that you're coming from, but some of the questions that have been raised, definitely in terms of your terrain of struggle as a resonance, what is it that you are taking from this discussion? I would like to maybe, for this round, take hands and look at the comrades who might want to reflect, of course, given that we would have allowed by comrades coordinating us to have 1 hour at least for reflection. We understand it's a Friday and all that, but I'm going to be taking, I see Comrade Koman's hand is up, I see Comrade Tapelo, his hand. We take perhaps, like, okay, I think 3, then we come back, Comrade. And if you want to be specific, let me also take Comrade Duma Kubule as well, who is joining, who has us today. Then Comrade Manzobela, when we come back in that round, I saw your hand is. Let's quickly consolidate the second round. Your hand was up first. Is there any comrade so that we move seamless? Leadership, you also the second. Okay, follow. And that side, yeah. Comrade Tapelo is in the first one. So let's do this comrade one. Komano, okay. Comrade Komano can, Comrade Tapelo start, then Comrade Komano comes through. And also can be specific if you are directing a question to particular comrade or you want the comrades to reflect and we allow them that opportunity, comrades, to respond. Thanks.
Thank you, comrade. Amandla. Forward with the undying spirit of Comrade Fidel Castro. Forward. No, comrades, thank you very much, Comrade Kwesi and Comrade Mika. I think that what we have had today was confirming how a neoliberal state can suppress and oppress the poor. I've always said that the issue about democracy, we must question this issue about democracy. What is democracy and for who? When the poor and marginalized continue to be washed away by floods in Durban, continue to burn alive in informal settlements, what is this democracy about? And when Comrade Kwesi spoke, I remembered when our president went to the Oval and kneeled down to capitalism and begged capitalism that it should remain in South Africa. And the question was, why is our president, when idiots like Trump says bring golfers because your country can play golf, and the president does that, bring that white rich man from South Africa to come and convince me if I still want to invest in South Africa, and our president does that. But my question is simple, comrade. What will it take for us as the working class to realize that these governments, in a form of liberation movement, are merely management of the capital order? And how are we as people are going to organize from the ground up in ensuring that what happened in the Sahel region happens in South Africa, in the Southern African region, and that an injury to one country is an injury to all. We have comrades from Pudemo here who have dangerous criminals who have been dumped in their country. So how do we, because we don't have presidents that are serving our interest, how as we as the working class from below organize ourselves to take power from those who are management of the capitalist order? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is also another contribution from Comrade Komani that lastly we'll take the head of Comrade Duma, then we'll get the sponsors and open up. But let's also try to keep to that allocation in terms of the two. Maximum 3 minutes, not because I know there will be a lot of appetite to reflect on this fundamental question, given that these are also issues that we're also grappling with ourselves. Over to you, Comrade Moore.
Manta. Away too. Good evening, comrades. Comrade Kwesi and Comrade Mika. Greetings to you also. Comrades, I had two questions, but as you went on, I think both of the two speakers mentioned how important uranium is. And I cannot live without mentioning or saying something about it. You know, the concern that we have is that in a country like ours, where uranium is mined as a byproduct of gold, Comrade Kwesi, you cannot even utilize that uranium because there are NGOs that are funded to campaign against any means of building additional nuclear power station. We only have one, which is Kubek in Cape Town. But that very uranium that is mined leaves the country on a daily basis. So it shows how the hypocrites operate. Comrades, my name is Koman Mawela. I'm from NUMSA region in Hlanganani. I'm the regional education officer. Thank you very much. I get offended when comrades mention coup when talking about Sahel, the Sahel region, because we characterize it as a democratic, as a patriotic revolution. In my view, coup is what Trump wants to stage in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela at the moment. That's coup. But what happened there is basically a revolution, because both the speakers mentioned what the masses would have done, the popular masses. Now, my question, Comrade Mika, I think you spoke more about what the workers would have done, is that since Sahel has shown us that everything is possible, change is possible when people are united across borders. How can we now, the workers, because I'm from NUMSA, so I'll lean more towards the workers. How can the mine workers in South Africa, the factory workers, the farm workers in South Africa form the links, international worker relations with the workers of the Sahel, so that we can jointly fight the system that is oppressing us all? My second question would be, okay, maybe to Comrade Kwesi about the fact that now the AES is facing a new challenge of building their own independent economic system. What experiences or lessons can we take as South Africa, as we plan our revolution? I heard comrades when you say Amanda, they've got that revolutionary spirit in them. In planning our revolution, what lessons can we take in order to make sure that we become successful, taking from the challenges that they would have faced and the successes? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, already 2 points is ready. And we'll take that question over, then we'll guide in terms of more.
Thank you very much to Comrades Mika and Comrade Kwesi for amazing presentations. I think it was Comrade Mika who asked, what does sovereignty mean? In our context, as South Africans, as Africans, it means we can't deposit our reserves in France. In South Africa, it means that we must nationalize our central bank. There is no, and then the second thing is that there is no reason for us as South Africans to borrow the money that our public money that we create from third parties, whether there's people on international bond markets or people in South Africa from Standard Bank or Old Mutual. Give me a reason why we must borrow the money that we issue from Old Mutual, Standard Bank, or international bondholders as opposed to our own. That's number 2. Number 3, sovereignty means we must kick out the IMF and the World Bank, and we must reduce foreign currency denominated debt. That's the second thing. But then, what does sovereignty mean? We must control our natural resources. I have long been a supporter of us controlling our natural resources. We must control our renewable and non-renewable natural resources. We have privatized all our non-renewable natural resources to these things called IPPs. I would nationalize all of them if I was in charge. So we have to control our national resources. In South Africa, our Public Investment Corporation owns 25% of the mines in South Africa. What are we doing to use that? So second last thing, sovereignty means control of the financial sector. That is the essence of what a developmental state is. And finally, Comrade Kwesi, the xenophobia in this country makes me ashamed to be South African. I4 Newsroom editor, they have been giving so much airtime to these xenophobes called Operation Dudula. When they appointed Vuyolwethu, the first thing I said to Vuyo, you've got to stop giving so much airtime on TV, because the media is fueling this xenophobia by giving credibility to these operational Dudula thugs. And one thing I must say is that we can't industrialize one country at a time. We have to industrialize as a region. And we must realize people mustn't be ahistorical. For more than a century and a half, we had a regional labor market. We had workers from Mozambique. We had workers from Lesotho. And I get very angry when South Africans say Lesotho are foreign nationals. There is nobody in Lesotho who has got family in South Africa. I am with the EFF on this one. We must get rid of unnecessary borders like the one with Lesotho and the one with Eswatini. South African Customs Union must be upgraded to a common market where there is a common movement of people. And finally, South Africans believe they are Nigerians who are taking over the country. Our census shows there's 24,000 Nigerians in South Africa. There were 24,000 Nigerians in 2012. I don't know what this irrational hatred of Nigerians is about. It is completely irrational, it's hatred. Thank you.
Thank you very much, comrades, for those reflections. And I think Comrade Mika and Comrade Kwesi, probably the couple of questions, but I think one was on the question to say, what will it take for us to realize the kind of situation, terrible situation, what will force us to act? And comrades, I know Comrade Duma, for instance, is also was not necessarily the point the question was, and we know in South Africa we contribute a lot around this particular question of sovereignty. And Comrade Kwesi and Comrade Mika as well talking. I think, especially for comrades here, but this issue is applicable across the continent. Currently, I think there's a case running against about 17 banks that tried to manipulate currency for a trade. So it tells you the question of sovereignty goes broader. How do we make sure that it is registered in everything that we are actually, dealing with in society? So there was that question from Comrade Tapel, and then Comrade Komani, who would have also posed a question. One of it was directed to Mika insofar as worker, the question of the worker to work, international worker to worker conduct, but also brought the masses for us to be able to go what channels and all of that. Both of you, comrades, feel free to reflect. I think, Mika, we can take your intervention response, and then I'll also give to Comrade Kwesi. Then, Comrade, I think we still have a bit of time, if I'm checking proper. We can again, because I promised Comrade Manchong, I think we were one of there was a second hand somewhere, but already there were two heads that were coming up, and I think there are comrades also there who are joining. So, yes, so don't worry, maybe we might have a couple of rounds, but let's deal with this one. Briefly, comrades responding. Shortly, I think there were two questions. Broader than that, were just comments that you can also feel free to reflect. Over to you, Mika.
Thank you, Vuyo, because my elder Kwesi will deal with the hard questions. The two things that I can, come on, this is your role, Kwesi, but the two things I will like to respond to is, so Komani mentioned about not liking this word of coup. And I agree, we dealt with it and we continue to deal with it because we want to take it back. Because, the etymology, the background meaning of coup means blow. Like coup d'etat means blow to the state. And so I think a part of us, we're trying to think about how we can reclaim this, because this is a blow to the state in the real sense, but maybe we haven't articulated it well. But in terms of how we can form links between workers, number one, the Nigerians who were the most active in supporting the popular uprising, otherwise known as a coup, were the trade union. And NUMSA and others have good relationships with certain West African organizations, and I think we need to continue to build on that. Language is a big, big, big barrier, for sure. But definitely, there can be more exchanges between the trade unions, and it doesn't have to be physical, it can be sharing information. And I don't know, again, in South Africa, how the AI revolution is happening, but since January, when China's DeepSeek was popularized, there's more opportunity to be able to translate information for free to access people on the continent. And we need to be more serious and organized about using technology to access people on the continent. That's one. Two is that there's really important initiatives, which again, if we don't have language being a barrier, that are really helpful and that could be a connector. And I think it relates to also Tapelo. What he said was that the AES has created a sovereign seed bank group for agricultural sovereignty. There are all these initiatives around agriculture, around trade unions, around journalists, around educators, around students, but often are not accessible to us because of language and because of the monopoly of kind of French mainstream, media. Then the last point is, Duma, I think you should lead the conversation about what sovereignty means and how we're going to rescue ourselves on the continent. But I think the bigger question, and I'm thinking about 3 years ago, I was at the China-Africa Forum in Senegal. Like, it was in 2021. It was a complete accident I was there. But the thing that made me sick to my stomach is that, so China is a partner in Africa. You might disagree with the methodologies, it varies how China operates, but China is still an important force in the world that is asserting different models of development. But when I was in Senegal, it was so upsetting to see how Africans, we were just, no one cared. It was just like elder people were coming with their own personal initiatives, but there was not a consolidated Africans coming to have a collective bargaining mechanism to actually call for something that is strategic in terms of our regional comparative, we call it comparative development or comparative assets. What is it called? The Bolivian comparative assets, where it's like, I think Duma's mouthing it, and I can't hear him from here.
Advantage.
Comparative advantage.
Will, say it to me so I can hear what he said.
Comparative advantage, comparative.
You have to switch it on.
Comparative advantage. Oh, am I?
Yes, comparative advantage. Sorry, it's where I am. It's like almost 1 a.m. So I'm sorry for that. But we're not really leveraging our comparative advantage. It was scary how we didn't even have in the language of the agreement Ubuntu or anything. Like, there was nothing that really said, we are here, we want to put forward something. It was just kind of whatever China sent to us, we said, okay, sure, that's fine. And that's something that we need to work much harder on in terms of how we build bargaining power, for lack of a better word. And we need to figure that out. Because this is also going to support the Sahel, and the Sahel would be a model in which we also need to leverage our comparative advantage politically and intellectually, because I don't think that our comrade in Burkina Faso is as advanced or has the political base as we want him to in terms of the organizational structure. So I'll end there, because I'm getting super excited and I wish I was there in person.
Thanks, Mika. This question of how the lesson from the consolidation of power in the Sahel for us.
Well, there's the most important basic questions which runs through. And that question is, what do we do? And many times when this question is posed, we find our friends who went to school in Cambridge and so on, looking at us and saying, let's go and educate the masses. And I said to them, what arrogance is this? Why do you not go and educate the masses? If you come from Ghana, do you know how cocoa is grown and how it's dried? That's the mainstream of the economy. We have nothing to educate the masses about. Indeed, our first responsibility is to join organizations. To join organizations so that we can pull our strength together and lessen our weaknesses and learn from each other. We are not teachers. We are not professors. We don't know more than the others. That arrogant attitude we have to shed if we are to make progress. That's number one. Now, this also linked to the question of sovereignty. And sovereignty is a very difficult subject to discuss. It's not easy, given our history. All these African countries, how did they come into being? Nigeria, Uganda, and so on. How did they come into being? Did we decide to create Nigeria? We had no role in the creation of the current African states. It was in 1844, that Otto von Bismarck decided to invite his other heads of states, heads of governments in Europe, to come to Bonn, to divide Africa according to their spheres of influence. There was no African at the table. No, not a single African was at the table. They put the map of Africa in front of them, they drew pencils and drew lines. And those lines have effectively become our boundaries in Africa today. Those boundaries are not to be defended, they are to be smashed if you are to make any headway. And for those of you who travel across our borders, I'm sure you see what I see. And I keep saying this all the time. I'm crossing from Ghana to Togo. And on the border, you find one house. The bathroom is in Togo, the kitchen is in Ghana. Because the people who do this land did not care about you, they did not care about your brother, they did not care about your cousin. They were interested in taking your gold, in taking your uranium, in taking your wealth, and they didn't give a damn who your brother was or who your sister was. So we need to tear down these boundaries and build a united Africa. You take our Western neighbors, La Côte d'Ivoire. There is one big ethnic group, the Nzima people. Their paramount chief is an Ivorian. Other Nzimas are Ghanaians. Does it make sense? It simply doesn't make any sense at all. Okay? So in discussing sovereignty, we have to take this into account. We have to take this into account. Now there's other thing that we need always to be guided by. Those who oppress us, those who colonize us, those who are stealing our wealth, always work together. They built the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and they said that if you attack one, you have attacked all of us. Not so. And we remain divided. Does that make sense? When the enemy, when the forces responsible for underdevelopment are united, that's the reason why we should also develop ironclad unity on the continent. It's an imperative. Without that, we are not going anywhere. So our unity is not just for fanfare and so on. Our unity is important for our survival. And then we also have to understand some very basic facts. Read our history books. What is in our history books? What is in our history books? The history that we teach our children. What is in it? How education was introduced by missionaries. Is that true? And that is what we continue to teach our children up to today. About 4 years ago, I went to a nursery school for babies in Ghana. And I was alarmed. What I was taught in nursery school in the 1950s is still being taught in nursery school in 2023. And I'm sure it's the same here. You go to the nursery school, what songs are children singing? London's burning, Lukuyonda. What crap, what nonsense. Why can't London is burning? Yes, so we need to change the educational curriculum. Absolutely. But now there's something else. Many people don't realize it. I'm beginning to observe it and I'm very deeply worried. All my grandchildren are speaking with American accents. They've never been to the United States of America. Why? Because all of us are buying tablets for the children. And we don't care what is on the tablet. It's the fashion. So we are buying tablets for the children. What are the children learning? What are they becoming? It's frightening. So today, your children don't have to go to Lagos to become Americans. To get a lot of fog in their head. The tablets you buy for them, transform them into your enemies right in your house. You understand? Something must be done about this. Our scientists, our IT specialists and so on, what are they doing about this? Because today, the colonial mentality comes on the tablet. It doesn't come in the castle. Well, it still comes in the castle somehow. But more in a tablet. So we need to reform our system of education, the content of education, and so we need to do that. And that is not the job of the Harvard trained and the Oxford trained. They don't know anything about us. That is the militant. That is the job of the revolutionary organization. I have to be careful. I want to go back to Accra tomorrow without a problem. But how careful can we be when the problems stare us in our face? One of the biggest calamities that happened in South Africa, which is still having a ripple effect in the labor movement, is the expulsion of NUMSA from Gusau. Why? Why do differences not be discussed and negotiated? Why did it come to that antagonistic level of expulsion and so on? The trade unions everywhere, including South Africa, have a responsibility to themselves and their members to unite and to fight a common cause. And I want to use this platform to call on the leadership of NUMSA to initiate the processes which will lead to building a complete unity of the trade union movement in South Africa. It's essential.
Thanks, Kwesi, leaving us with very key questions in terms of consideration, our working class organizations, because we see the energies in the Sahel in terms of pursuing unity. So I think we can learn a couple from that. Comrade Barigari, there was a head of Comrade Nhondo before, which I'm going to then acknowledge. Three, but I can see that maybe one of us comrades next, but we also need one from this side. Yeah, okay, so okay, the way we do leadership, I will add that side, take one, so that it's balanced. But the only thing, I see the number of comrades, it's far at the back, but I will just take one more, and then between the two comrades, no, just behind, one of you, here, yes, that's one. One head, no, we'll keep checking if there is time. They go kill them as the last. Let's also not forget, as well reflecting coming, thinking that let's think about where to deal with the question of sovereignty, lessons for ourselves. But also we said there is the question of the 16th September, which is historic in the sense that the consolidation of the Sahel states that Comrade Kwesi and Comrade Mika were unpacking to us, formally in the sense of the charters that they created. In other words, how they practically delinked, as Samir Amin will use the concept, from colonial institutions and set forth a path for themselves. So we'll take you, Comrade, let's try Comrade 2. I know we have a lot of reflection, but let's keep to the time. I have not been brutal, so if I see that people are going over now and start trying, so Comrade Nhondo, and please, Comrade, others who I don't know, please introduce yourself. I think so, this is fine, or you'll go, or you, okay. You'll introduce yourself. Speakers, all of you introduce yourself and the organization. Now we're okay, now those will be 3 hands.
Amanda, my comrade. Amanda, my comrade.
Kunalesisho lesi bathi those who fit you is those who control you. They control your mind. My comrade, ngizostika kakhulu kulento le yaselento, lento le eyenzakalayo more especially South Africa xenophobia. My comrade, we are becoming ama-Israel. Thina njengama South Africa, we are becoming ama-Israel because kunabantu abangasawatholi ama-ARVs. And then kunabantu futhi abangasawatholi amapilisi welento we high blood, but city South Africa belongs to everyone who lives in it. Why bakwenza lokho? They make us African to fight each other because of they know that we are going to become Burkina Faso, and they knew that last year we were getting there, but this year they start the xenophobia attacks so that we can focus on it and not focusing on being a new Burkina Faso. And we have to build a unity, and we have to go to the clinics to fight for our fellow brothers who doesn't get our ARVs, because we are becoming labantu laba mangabe obhuti bethu sibancisha ama-ARVs then babuya bazogula, and then when they become sick, bazoshona, mabeshona, are we going to deny them ukuthi bangcwatshwe South Africa now? That is a question. If bayashona, it is not that our responsibility to take them back to their country now, because of, I think, for me, ngizophinda futhi ngithi South Africa belongs to us, to everybody who lives in it. It means that asilweni ma-comrade, asingathuli njengoba sithulile kwi-Palestine. Asike siqaleni ukuthi siyalapha emakliniki, silwe sikhombise i-unity, sibakhombise ukuthi ngale nto abayiqalile manje, we can stand up against them. The next time, sizoba iBurkina Faso, i-South region yonke, we are going to build our own banks, we are going to be united. Ngiyabonga.
The question that is a dimension of struggling, the question of access to healthcare and making sure that the masses are actually benefiting is pointed as a thematic issue, but it's one of the issues that if you will check and ask ourselves, how is it pursued in the Sahel, drawing the lessons from what is it that we must do, and to say, it's a site of struggle that we can identify and seek to unite the masses and rally them around. Comrade, sorry, let me have your reflections. Is there a mic there? Your hand was up. Which second? Okay, the last hand is here. Okay, so you'll be the last one. Is that okay? Proceed. Sorry about that.
Amanda Basha. Amanda Basha. Babuza ibanzi lo wasethembisa ilungu labahlali base-S.M.G. Comrades, kunalento eyakhulunywa the late Robert Mugabe wathi Africa has become effect yama-capitalist, and our presidents have become CLOs of those companies. Now, into nje kumele siyibukisise kahle kahle. eSouth Africa, we never negotiated for land. The land is still in private hands. Now, how do you gain sovereignty without land? Where do you build houses without land? Where do you build schools that will build the culture of Africanism? We still have a problem like South Africa. And that problem, which is the result of the working class is divided. Because if you look at the question here, we trade unions. They're all central. They are no longer localized like they used to be in the 80s. People learn the politics of workers from the ground. Now unions are only based on companies. In the townships, no one knows what a union is. It's not like it was before in the 80s, where people learned the basics of trade unionism from local level. That is why even the labor brokers are taking advantage, because they come direct down to the base and employ on temporary basis. And what is happening is that even if you look at the what do they call it now? It used to be Department of Housing. Today they call it human settlement. Those people last year, they came up with a white paper, and that white paper categorized the people who qualified for RDP houses: elderly, disabled, and single parents. Now, if you look at the stats of employment in this country, from 18 up to 59, those people are employed on casual basis, on temporary basis. And what the government is doing when it comes to housing, they say you only qualify for a social housing, not an RDP house. So what happens between the age of 18 up to 59? So we have a very serious crisis. And this is due to the capitalist system that was adopted by the ANC government in this country. The government of national unity is not going to change the status quo, but the people themselves on the ground need to come out and say, we need our country back. The electoral system to me is rubbish. It's not going to change anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade. Thanks for that reflection. Comrade Hamari, on the fact that we still have contradictions, such as inequitable distribution of land, and is raising a number of other sides of struggle, including casualization of work, and all other comrades burning questions, which, as we reflect, we must continuously look and ask ourselves, how is it that the popular organization, Comrades Wilbans and other comrades, in the Sahel, mass mobilization, will have delivered what they, if it's possible. I think the question really is that, why is we posing this question? Let's also be, looking programmatic in terms of what can be done. Yes, we can reflect to say, we don't have, we know comrades are, we can spend the whole night discussing our issues. And the rest of the continent, we can take each part of the continent, even if you single out one country, you can see the crisis. But at the end of the day, what is to be done? So I think let's continue to reflect. Maybe we'll get one more. Comrade is fine. Okay, yeah, one more. Then we'll allow maybe reflections again. I think some of them, yes, they ask questions, but some of them are comments as well, in terms of comrades are responding to say we have the crisis Mangu was talking about on the healthcare front, which is the side of struggle if you talk of the socio-economic condition of the working class. Comrades is talking about land and the rest of other issues. It's another side of struggle. But at the end of the day, how do we consolidate? Also, as popular organizations, we'll come back later to speak more concretely in terms of the program that you could be championing leading up to the solidarity for the 16th, but also beyond that, what are we going to do given this over to you, community? Let's keep to that 2 to 3 minutes. Introduce yourself as well, and then we will have reflections, Comrade Kwesi, and then we'll also take Comrade Mikaela. And then I think by half-past, Comrade, we can't go beyond, so we'll have to maybe look at another round. I know they're the far back, but not all of you cadres. We'll just pick one, please, Comrade. Some of you are covered by what other cadres are reaching. We'll pick at the back, maybe come a little BTSC, give that front, Christine, I can see there's appetite. Give that side a little bit, and then Comrade will have to allow also our speakers to wrap up, so that we make some clear way forward, pointed, because it's not just for the sake of having a session or a seminar or all that. At the end of the day, we're a working class organization. How do we respond? And they mentioned, especially I think a Comrade was hammered on the question, importance of organization being represented. Over to you.
Good evening, comrades. Aluta. Aluta. Thank you. The person standing in front of you now, Usitandile Mazayalala. I will admit that before coming to this event, I was quite ignorant, I would say, to what is actually going on in Sahel. I think seeing, Ibrahim Traoré sort of gain this popularity, it was like, a renaissance of Sankara, but that is the kind of way I started and ended in my thinking. But now, being here and reflecting and, the points that have been made by various comrades, I'm going to take it more seriously. The question, I think, I will pose it to Comrade Mika, and just to say that in 5 years' time, the world globally, we would have lived under the system of neoliberalism for almost half a century, right? And for me, more particularly, I'm more interested in its tentacle of austerity, right? Because when I think about sort of what is creating the conditions for popular uprising in Africa, in more instances it's like very direct, like in Kenya you had a very direct protest around the budget, but also, you know, these other social ills that we see coming up, xenophobia, you know, everyone is like, oh, well, there's no capacity, but the real reason why there is no capacity is because there is no money that is being given to healthcare, you know, for the state to build its capacity so it can serve everyone who lives in South Africa. And so maybe my question is, around the economic program of the Sahel region, how have these states found a way to repoliticize the conversation of public money? Because I think something that we experience in South Africa, but broadly I think because of neoliberalism, is kind of certain issues of development, specifically economic policy, so monetary and fiscal policy, have sort of been cast into the shadow of expertise, right? Where nobody but the economists can kind of understand what needs to be done and what is the best way to go about things. And I think they've really been able to monopolize that conversation. And only recently, like in South Africa, where we saw a bit of some debate and politics about the budgets and the budget vote and this, that, and the next. But how do we really, what are the strategies that we can kind of draw from and be inspired by through the Sahel region of, you know, repoliticizing the conversation of fiscal and monetary sovereignty? Yeah, thank you.
Hi everyone. Aluta. Okay, so I'm going to be very quick because I can see time is not on that side. I'm just going to touch on two things. One, the person that was sitting behind us spoke about an injury to one is an injury to all, but I think in South Africa we say that but it has terms and conditions. So we have a lot of problems and it makes it difficult for us to mobilize. So during apartheid we had one common problem. So we all knew, regardless of what's happening, this is the common problem and it made it easy to mobilize, right? During Fees Must Fall, similar thing. We have all these different problems, but we focused and we picked one. So now the problem is that we are so divided that it makes it so difficult. So yes, we want to be pro-Palestine, but there's some people that are like, yeah, I'm pro-Palestine, but you're xenophobic. Yeah, you're not xenophobic, but you're anti-LGBTQIA+ rights. How do we then revolutionize the country, the continent, when you're so against these people, yet you want the better for our continent? We need to start accepting ourselves and know that those people from those communities that we are separating are people that are going to help us. And I just want to touch on something that the person said about the entry-level jobs and what they said, but I just want to say that I think we also need to come together and realize how elitist politics is and how elitist it is to have an entry-level job and an internship. You cannot expect someone to live off 5,000 that they don't even get paid every month, yet management is getting paid every single month. These internships and entry jobs target black young people. Black young people who have black taxes that they need to pay. Black young people that still live in the townships and still need to travel to towns. We are not angry enough, we're not uniting enough. That money is not enough. Okay, that's all, thank you.
Let me take a reflection from Comrade Kwesi, then I'll also give to Comrade Mika as well, just brief. Then it will be the very last of the exam that will open up in that order. Then we try to consolidate and pave the way forward. Over to you.
Let me just simply go straight to the point of what it is that we can do concretely to help the Sahel states to consolidate. Now, one of the major problems that the Sahel states face is what has been called Islamic insurgency. You understand? There's a problem with that term, because when Christians pick up weapons and engage in insurgency, you hardly hear about Christian insurgency. But that is the term that is being used for now. You understand? Now, how many of us know that Ukraine is active in the Sahel, killing Malian soldiers, killing Burkina Faso soldiers, killing Nigerian soldiers. How do you ever know? And the Ukrainian intelligence is not even hiding. It's admitting that publicly. The Ukrainian intelligence is saying that because the Russians are helping the Sahel states with their military hardware and so on, they have a right to enter the Sahel to fight on the side of the jihadists. What else can be more outrageous than this? So I think it's important for us to speak out loud against these kinds of presence, not just in the Sahel, but throughout Africa. We have to be able to tell Ukraine that the Sahel is not part of Russia, and it's certainly not part of Ukraine, and that we should be allowed to determine our own destiny. We need to be worried about the spread of foreign military bases on our continent. These military bases have not been established on the African soil to camp tomatoes. They've not been established to produce potatoes. They've been established as instruments of domination, as mechanisms for keeping us where we are. And if we have to move forward, we have to go back into our history and adopt the stand that our heroes like Nkrumah took against the presence of all foreign military bases on our soil. And we have to say loud and clear that Ukraine must exit our continent and deal with their own problems.
Thank you very much, Comrade Kwesi. Comrade Mikaela, there were questions. I don't know if you got pretty much everything, but yeah. If there's anything that you missed, you can indicate. But also most of what the comrades were reflecting from Manzombo all the way to the last comrade who spoke as well from the institutions, is really the burning questions of the working class, burning problems, whether you're talking of healthcare, whether you're talking about the question of the land, and also issues. I think one of the comrades from the tertiary was raising something about how do we even bring back repoliticize the whole debate about people participating in public finances, drawing from the Sahel, insofar as what you are seeing there, and noticing that there is a deep politicization or lack of popular participation in this kind of, these debates are left to technocrats and those kind of people. And I think both their points pretty much interrelated if you look at, but most looking at in terms of both the Sahel, how does it address some of the fundamental questions and zooming in as well to our own contradictions that we're facing.
Thank you, Vuyo. Thank you for all of your thoughtful questions and contributions, which I'm hoping, is somebody taking minutes? Is somebody writing notes? Because part of our collective thing is we need to make sure our collective discussion is being advanced. And I have 2 points, I think, that are related to some of the questions that were raised. Number one is, I appreciate the input of the first comment sister who said that South Africa is a little bit acting like the Israel of the region, in which we definitely need to reposition and push hard for South Africa to be a place in which we can actually have debate. There are few places on the continent where we can have debate and actually interact with one another about the question of sovereignty. And so everyone here right now is playing a really important role. The second is that the comrade, the Malume, who spoke about how mass mobilization organizations, trade unions have been decentralized or centralized and not being decentralized. This is a problem across the world. This is a problem across the global south. I don't know if comrades saw, Bolivia recently had an election. And it was depressing because what we saw was that the left failed to maintain and build the popular mass organizations. And that's why they lost the elections. They're going to go into a second round now, but there are two right-wing candidates. But this is a problem across the global south where we cannot, and it's the same for AES, we cannot speak about a popular uprising, a popular revolution, a popular anything if we're not building the mass organizations. And this means also figuring out how in South Africa, in other parts of the global south, we reconcile the fact that centralism is important, but we still need to recuperate and decentralize mass organizations and make sure we have participation on the mass. And then there are two other small points regarding, and I hope, I'm sorry, we can't always answer the questions, but one is that this is a hard question, but when the comrade was mentioning about healthcare and others were mentioning about certain social institutions that have been failing us, we also need to recuperate politics. We need to recuperate socialism. This makes me think of Milka Cabral, who was saying there is an ideological deluge, or whatever he said, specific terminology, but we also need to recuperate the politics of the working class. And that involves actually standing up and trying to push for the AES countries to push for a politics based on the masses. And that is across the continent. And we have this rare opportunity where I think there is a little bit of an opening, but that there is an opportunity to reclaim things that are happening about the working class. And lastly is that regarding the question of fiscal policy, monetary policy, and how we can intervene, I also think we have a rare moment, and the Sahel could play an important role if we were being strategic, is reclaiming the, Sankara was part of this with Fidel Castro initiating it, the United Front Against Debt. It's simply irreconcilable to me that we, till this day, accept to repay. Most of our African countries are paying 60% of public revenue going towards debt repayment. That's insane to me. When most of the debt is erroneous debt, it's part of debt that we are trying to, resolve our contradictions. But I think that we could, led by the AES, if we also push them more progressively to fight for a united front against debt. And it's not on us. It's really not on us. It's time for us to push and say, it's enough. We're done. And I think that the AES creates that opening to say we have to reclaim ourselves and say, let's fight against repaying the debt. Because we're actually repaying debt that is owed to us, as Kwesi said, based on the looting of the historical conditions.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mika, for Comrade Kwesi for responding to those. And bear in mind, these are reflections. Yes, some are direct questions, but I think even in the question, there's reflections as well. So, Comrade, before we take the last round, we need to hammer this question that we're leading up to. Remember the date at which these three countries consolidated and the inspiration that we're trying to seek from them pursuing their sovereignty. So, Comrade, there is a call to our organizations. We are popular organizations, trade union, student movement, shared dwellers movement, social movements and all that. And Comrade, we have to, Comrade are reminding us that our organization try to, in this sentiment and spirit that we have, publicly express solidarity with the Alliance of the Sahel States, but also, Comrade, to mobilize, because there is this date of the 16th, which we must be able to answer as our organization, what are the events that we can host on that particular day, Comrade. Yes, we're here now together as organizations, but we're going back to the organization where we are serving and being part of the masses. One of the suggestions is the question that we must host political education event, such as the teachings and forums, similar to this fashion. But also, Comrade, we had what Comrade Lawrence Phakathi was doing. If you have cultural expressions that we have, please feel free to do that in resistance, Comrade. Whether it's artwork, it's poetry, it is hip-hop, it's music. feel free to go. The cultural dimension of the struggle is also very important. Also create moments of agitation and disruption and find ways to integrate solidarity with the ally. Because what was saying, we are not just reflecting, especially here in the comments, that you have witnessed what has taken place there. We are going to continue reading on it. But how do we draw this inspiration? And I'm hoping that the last speakers are going to help us. Comrade, forgetting your name, please come say that by the mic. Right at the back here. Just right at the back. Please read the music down. Okay. Then the one. So that's the one. Okay.
Thank you.
And then we come to Comrade State, or if we finish over both with you, I think. But you yes.
Thank you. My name is Skubo Jebe.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm out of the way.
Let's stick to the allocated.
My issue is, in this continent, for the first time, we are going to have a G20 which is hosted by us here, by the colonial countries who are extracting our commodities. Now the issue and the concern is, are they not going to come here to reinforce, the continuation of that? Comrade Kwesi has outlined the issue of extracting the commodities and commodities that are not adding value to us as the producers. And now what shall we be aware of? Is it not a real emphasization of taking more and more and more, and also to create another, war, civil war amongst the countries, especially those who are rich in commodities? Thank you.
Right, well, that question is looking at the G20. I think South Africa, if I'm not wrong, is actually a host. He's raising to say, isn't this a reproduction, this G20 or this kind of bloc? Comrade from Pudemo, I did say, because I saw the leaders, both of them wanted to speak, so, but comrade, if you can divide the time between yourselves.
Okay, Amanda, comrades, I'm from Pudemo, I will say my name, but I'm very, very much happy to be in this platform and to meet these leaders here. And I wish we could make it a habit to always come here and have this discussion. Comrades, I'm taking this to you as a reflection because of time to say the both of you, comrade from the Tricontinental, Comrade Lenin in the 1920s, he will also speak, we came up with this thesis that answered the question and come with the two-state deal and the question of the national democratic revolution. And in September in Swaziland, what's happening, Jacob Zuma, who is driving this monarchist posture towards this Pan-Africanism question, is having a summit of traditional leaders. I heard you, comrade, speak of the issue of religions and Christianity and Islam and everything. To the question of the AES, how do we use this opportunity, comrades, especially to try and gather this momentum, seize the moment, and give direction to our struggle as Pan-Africanists, given the very questions, like I mentioned, with the issue of this definition of Pan-Africanism and associating it with monarchs and stuff like that, which is Jacob Zuma is busy doing right now, and is already being useful in dividing our struggle, our class struggle, and the trade and everything that's happening in South Africa. So, comrade, I'm trying to talk and try to be quick with I think that is my organization.
Yeah. But I think they got the crux in terms of what the angle that we were going to. Yes, okay, then we have comrade state, comrade. Then from there, we're going to allow comrades, comrade Mika, comrade Kwesi to reflect in their reflections as well. Given the time, I think we'll try maybe to reflect on your questions, but also we'll afford you, comrades, maybe a couple of minutes each to also consolidate and make the concluding remarks from your side. Yes, my leader, speak brief.
Yes, thank you. I'm Comrade Mtusi from Swaziland. I have a question, Comrade Mika. You say that more than half of the coup d'etat around the world happened in Africa. As I was sitting down there, I'm asking myself, why most of this coup d'etat happened in Africa? Another question, Comrade. Most of these coup d'etat happened in Africa, but after the seize of power, they I don't know what to say. How can I put this? I'm calling my sword. Bayashintsha lento labantu bese baseva bayina interest bangasasevi lawa labathi bamuyisekele lo munye for ngathi understand yangiswati. Then kwagcina comrade kulenzaba yezinophobia. Ngiyatibuta nje ukuthi ngabe le union yabona isithi ibona because ngeke phela abantu bangene kade sibhedlela. Bantu betebonisa sibhedlela. Bese kuthamba umuntu ngaphandle osusa wena betebonisa. Ithi le union noma nayo iyavuma ithi right kusiyente. Another thing comrade. Thena sibe angry labantu bezinophobia. Esikhundleni sokuthi understand ukuthi labantu lama conditions abaphila ku South Africa umva abasebenzi vele. Na umtshela ukuthi awusebenzi uma umuntu waseZimbabwe usebenzi wakho. Ukakholelwa ukuba vele akasebenzi. Sifika ukuthi sitinike isikhathi sizana ukuthi sibachazele abantu ukuthi yini le nkinga kahle kahle because ababona inkinga bacabanga ukuthi inkinga maZimbabwe usebenzi wakho namasonto. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think before just make sure that comrades get that question. Maybe yes, you might direct Comrade Mika, but I think Comrade Kwesi also when you have an opportunity to reflect on it. But the comrade was asking a question in terms of you would have mentioned that the half of the total coup d'etat, if you analyze, that would have happened even in the world. Half of them, I think Comrade Kwesi raised this, would have happened. This question, the comrade asking perhaps why there is such a dynamic. But secondly, in most that would have analyzed some of the coup d'etat. After these leaders, they take power in the coups and all that, they then tend to sell out. In other words, they are not keeping. And I know there was a reflection on this issue, but your comrades feel free. So the comrade is interested to find out all those kind of questions. I think the last one is around xenophobia, comrade, which has also been raised. And remember, in the context of the anti-fascist campaigns and all that, the question of xenophobia, comrade is asking, but I think my leader can broaden it. Yes to the nurses, why? Then where are the nurses' unions? Probably is directing. But also the rest of the working class in so far as being decided. Like for instance, I think it was John, you would have seen on the street taking practical some of these questions, confronting insofar as the xenophobia. So he's asking, and I'm raising leadership that there is already practical, but I'm saying you are stretching it maybe to the broader working class movement in terms of there is this particular problem in the xenophobia. You got the one from Comrade who spoke earlier from Pudem when you covered. Comrades, tell me, you have the last. Then comrades, after this, I know you might have, please continue to reflect on this question because you still have some appetite, but unfortunately, we'll give the speakers now to wrap up. First with Mika, give Comrade Kwesi as well, so that we can consolidate. Comrades, tell me.
Africa. My way. Africa. My way. Thank you, comrades. My name is Stephen Kumutu from NUMSA. First of thing is that I'm getting worried because the question is, out of all what Kwesi he was elaborated earlier on and Comrade Vuyo about what must be done. That's a very fundamental question. And I find it very strange and very difficult to say, we are talking about colonizing us or capitalists and everything, but we are promoting the capitalist system, but we don't see. We always been on the revolutionary platforms, rubbish the capitalists, but we are living the capitalist lives, and we like that capitalist life. That's the problem that I have, because one of the fundamental issues that firstly is the English that we are using. the colonized language. We are promoting that. That's the first mistake that we are doing. My brother here was struggling by getting English here. All of us something we're laughing. I'm looking at you and I said, hey, we are in trouble. Because this language of English is not our mother tongue. And I always tell them, that I don't have a problem to not talk English. English is not my mother tongue. I don't care. I always tell them. They said about the way you are saying. But I want to thank much on Comrade Kwesi and Comrade. They raised a very important issues. One of the issues that he raised, my brother this side, he raised the issue of education. And it's the things that we always talk about it. Curriculums of our kids. I'm an SGB at the school of my kid. I always fight with them. And I say, what nonsense is this? Why are we always, even today, singing the very same tune that you were saying? And we don't raise those things. But we come in here as a parent and say we don't want the capitalist system to function. But at the same time, we promote that. Because when we go to the school of our kids, we promote that curriculum is correct. Everything is what. Busivio, they come here, they introduce everything that come from America. We agree. But at the same time, we are saying we're fighting capitalists. We're wearing the clothes of the capitalists. What they call it, gush, and what else? We always break all those things. And we promote the capitalists, indeed. We are not promoting the socialism ideas. Because if we were saying we promote that, we should have to actually saying proudly South Africa. Yes. Buy here in South Africa the clothes. So we go to Santen, we go to Mall of Africa. I cannot buy something here. I will go there, because we promote capitalism. Us here, but we are saying we are working class. Contradictions. So the things that I want to raise it fundamentally, as my brother was saying, it's not only education only, comrades. There's a lot that we must do. We cannot go around here and push the people and think the people that they don't see what is happening. That is why you find today, Comrade Vuyolwethu, at the GNU, vis-a-vis the ANC, that they are doing there. That's why SSCP now, why they are Mayeye is because of, they see there's no revolutionary there. But they cannot go out because their bosses are there in the government and the state. They don't know what they must do. So there's a lot of contradictions. So we need to come out and say, as a working class, we must unite as a working class. As my sister, she was elaborated earlier on, of the mass organization. Come together. We must have, Comrade Vuyolwethu, an ample time during the week or 2 days or 3 days where we will come and debate this kind of a thing. It's very fundamental. Because in the short space of time, we can never elaborate what we want to elaborate. But what I want to say to my brother this side, indeed, we need to come together and make sure that we don't promote the capitalist comrades. The ideas of the capitalists, we must take it from our head. And if you can take that thing from our head, and we will transform ourselves. And our kids, the way my brother was talking about the iPad, he was talking about iPad and tablets. We are happy. Even myself, my kid is got the iPad. And she will tell me that I want it. And indeed, all the time when I go at home, indeed my brother is talking the truth. You find that you look at TikTok, you look at other things that I can't even understand. And even the language that he was talking about, of the English, he would want to say, he would always want to rectify me, Comrade Vuyolwethu, and say this accent of your English is wrong with it. So I want to compare with you, my brother, and we must get away from this thing of capitalists. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Comrade, I was down that side. Where's your next movement? It's a bending, okay, please Comrade, because now I'm already borrowed, no longer in the time that was allocated by a Comrade coordinating us. Yes, leader, okay. Position Comrade Gela.
My name is Larato Matabata from the Shapewellers Movement, Alliance of Sahel States. I would like to answer a question from our comrade from Swaziland. in regards to the question of what is it that the union, what does it take actually for a union in terms of healthcare? So, Budwami, in terms of Dudula operation, abantu asikwazi ukuyivimba because i-union i-defender ama-healthcare workers, because if you can check, bayababhadala. You join the union, ngemali yakho uyababhadala. So in that case, they have to represent you in whatever that suits you or expenses. So even Nati as South Africans, we are affected by that action in Operation Dudula. Because now in terms of healthcare workers, bona benefit because now uzotola clinics or hospitals kuba empty recently. So meaning umsebenzi wabo it's being reduced, while Tina on the other hand we are suffering the consequences. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think sorry, I think that was probably just direct to say what are some of the subjective weaknesses internal in the system, because the comrade would have been asking what are the unions doing, and the comrade is reflecting. There might be limitations insofar as those that are organizing in the nursing space. She was raising that. The couple of things that she's raising in terms of if there's less people, it means that they might not be active or working. In other words, go slow for them or something like that. But let's not leave it out. It's one answer comrade was attempting. Comrade, I know that unfortunately the leaders, my apology, I can say what there are other comrade who are bending at the back, but unfortunately, I would strongly encourage let's continue to have these discussions after leadership. Not to that of cutting yourselves, but please, because of time, I'm going to allow both Comrade Mika to reflect, try to respond, indicate where you did not hear clearly, and we'll try to come back, and then Comrade Kwesi as well. Concluding remark, Comrade, and then we'll hammer again on what the public actions leading up to the 16th, but beyond the 16th, because Sahel is not just 16, it's an ongoing program that we must continue to take insights from. Over to you, Mika.
Thanks, comrades, and thank you for everyone who's in the room. This is very rich discussion, and I'm very excited that folks are very excited and sharing their ideas about what needs to be done. With regards to the questions, I'll try to be brief, but the comrade who raised the G20. Part of, I think, that the Sahel raises that we need to take into serious consideration and make sure we have a collective discussion about. The Sahel and the Alliance of AES is basically undermining all of these formal institutions like the G20 and questioning it. I don't know if comrades saw, but like a week ago, there was a UN person who was expelled from Burkina Faso because they created a report that Burkina Faso was like, no, this is not correct. And so part of the intervention with this like seeking sovereignty is that they're trying to also question what are these organizations like the G20? Do they fundamentally align with us? Do they represent the continent? The G20 does not represent the continent in terms of proportion, and we need to think seriously about these so-called international organizations. That's why we are heavy and supporting the Alliance of Sahel States. It's not because of necessarily the politics, because we question the logic of international organizations, including ECOWAS, AU, and everything like that. So I think that this is a moment of questioning that opens up things. That's number one. Number two, somebody mentioned religion, I think?
Yes.
And I want to say I was in Niger for the international solidarity with the Alliance of the Sahel States last year in November. And, okay, comrades in South Africa, tell me honestly, this was the first time in my life, I lived in South Africa for like 7 years, this was the first time in my life that an imam and a Catholic bishop shared a kind of sermon opening up this meeting of political alliances, and they said, we want the Sahel States to succeed, we want the alliance to succeed. It was the first time in my life I've ever seen something like that. So I think the Alliance of Sahel States is also questioning how we approach politics and how we approach religion, because religion is a political organization. Then lastly, and I'm sorry if I'm running through this too fast, the comrade who mentioned education and language, I'm putting this to all of you right now. We have our comrades in the AES who speak French. In Burkina Faso, all of their public declarations are now in the indigenous language, but they still use French as the working language. So we also need to figure out for ourselves, what is tactics and strategy? Strategically, we want to speak our indigenous languages, but tactically we have working languages, sadly, we inherit that we have to use. And so we need to figure out what parts of the way we communicate help us to further the politics in the short term, but in the long term, we want to build different structures, different opportunities. I'm just so happy that this discussion is happening and that comrades are super, super excited. That's all I have to say for now, but let's keep talking, and the 16th of September is coming soon, so let's keep working towards that.
Thank you very much, Mikaela, for the attention you take for staying with us. Thank you very much for your contributions. Let's head over to corporate Kwesi, and then we will try to conclude and then thank everyone. Over to you.
Well, I'm very happy that the comrade from Podemo raised the question of chiefs and so-called kings. There's a problem in our countries. You cannot have kingdoms in republics. That's a contradiction. Okay? In the republic, sovereignty resides in the people. In the kingdom, sovereignty resides in the king. That contradiction is obvious, and we haven't been able to work our way around that contradiction. But more important is that there is no chief or king who is not a tribal leader anywhere in the world. Every king, every chief is a tribal leader. And I cannot say that they don't want to promote tribalism or ethnicity, and yet they promote chieftaincy and they promote these other things as well. Again, there's another contradiction. Okay. Now, what do we do as who we are? So what do? Do we confront the establishment? And we have to confront the establishment. To what extent are we going to confront the establishment and so on? I did that some years ago. Did that in Ghana some years ago. And what did that end in? That ended in a fatwa being issued that I was being banned from all Ashanti areas, and every Ashanti who sees me in Ashanti has a duty to kill me. Did I help the struggle? I'm not sure. So, at every material time, we have to be tactical. We have to weigh the most important battles that we need to fight at every material time. We can't fight all the battles all the time. There are some we can fight and win now. And there are some we can fight and lose, but open up avenues for future struggles as well. Those are decisions that movements would make. Those are not decisions that people like me can make. They are decisions for movements to make. Now, the question of healthcare has come up repeatedly this night. And in a way, it has been linked to xenophobia. Now listen, most diseases are infectious, not so. Most diseases are infectious. Even the common cold is infectious. So if you are South Africa, and you want to preserve South Africa for South Africans and protect South African interests, and you go to hospitals and say that foreigners who have diseases which are infectious should not be treated, what are you doing to the South African society? You are killing the South African society. Because they will not be treated. They will come back to town and they will infect everybody. That's how smart xenophobia can be. It's so smart that sometimes it doesn't make any sense at all. You know. Now, the point about healthcare is that only a healthy people can produce the things that we need and distribute them. It's not just about production. When production occurs, what is produced also has to be distributed in order for it to make meaning and so on. And healthcare is not about the person who is immediately benefiting. Healthcare is community. Community is expressed more in healthcare than in many other fields. You cannot personalize it. If I have tuberculosis, it's a problem for the whole country, it's a problem for the whole world. Because it can be spread. One source of tuberculosis can affect the whole of South Africa, can affect the whole of Africa, can affect the whole of the world. And that is why it's important to socialize healthcare, because it affects all of us. Okay. Healthcare also becomes important because we are all not born with the same abilities. There are some people who are born brain dead. There are some people who are born crippled. There are some people who have some conditions. Do we sentence those people to death because of the conditions that they have? Because if you don't socialize production and distribution of what is produced, what you actually do is to sentence anybody who is born with a deformity, a certain kind of deformity, to death. Is that justifiable? Now, consequently, we cannot discuss everything here tonight. But at least we have started something tonight. And I'd like to thank all of you who came, and I thank you sincerely for coming, for having the patience to listen to our rumble. We are so grateful that you had this patience. And for those who organized it, it's been a very nice evening of learning and exchange. And if you want to change our world and build a better world, perhaps these are some of the first tentative steps that we ought to take. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you so very much for coming and for participating in this.
Thank you very much, Comrade Kwesi, and let's once more, Comrade, join me in thanking both comrades who helped to unpack this very difficult, and I agree, President, we are going to need hence the core leadership that says continue the decentralized political education in your spaces, among other critical pillars. Thanks to Mika, thanks to Kwesi, and to all comrades for joining us. We really appreciate that. We want to remind you, comrades, and again hammering that you are coming from the organization. There is the question of the Sahel, comrade, that on why the significance of the 16th of September. It is because that specific time in 2023, these countries consolidated in this alliance, sovereign alliance between them. They signed what we call the Lipta Okuma, establishing this alliance. And there's so many things. And I listened to some of the comrades. If you look at those projects very closely, and you listen to Fanon, you listen to also there for Kwame Nkrumah, you listen to Ngugi and so forth. Some of the issues, comrade, of colonialism reproducing itself, look at very closely in terms of how the decolonization struggle is being pursued. And I know that here in this country, yes, comrade, part of the fist must fall was also dealing with the decolonization. But how do we broaden this context to say decolonize? And I don't know, comrades, if they noticed, even in their chair, comrade, yes, take the dossier according to read it, but also there is this flag that comrade put in terms of what it symbolizes. Both comrade, these things are very important, including, and I know that you are hammering on this question of colonialism and its vestiges. It's similar to what Frans Fanon says, it lives behind germs of rods, comrade, which must clinically detect. And I think this Sahel comrades and the people of the Sahel, we must hammer that we are in solidarity with the peoples of the Sahel and the project that is being pursued there. And comrade, just a little bit of a note there that you see those colors that he has, the green background and everything else, including if you look at how the Sahel is drawn, insofar as its geographical description, and how they deliberate. I would encourage you, maybe we don't have time to really unpack, but I would encourage you, as part of the reading, corporate and understanding this program, go read those symbols. Because decolonization, corporate, it's calling into question the whole colonial arrangement. With those words, corporate, please, we want to emphasize, go back in the context, the SASCOs that could be with us, EFF, Student Command, organizations, NUMSA, Corp Crew, and all other formations of the working class, without necessarily counting everyone. There are many comrades who are joining us. But please, leadership, find a way to say how we're going to not only this dossier, but any materials that comrades could be sharing with us, and including yourselves. We must, from these talks, I hope that we're not just as understanding your impatience and that of others. Let's start to make qualitative leaps. Yes, we meet, but how do we connect the unities that you are raising? We must practically pursue those things amongst ourselves. Students, the organized working class, the peasants, social movement, and all other groupings. There's a lot of other side of battles that we are fighting as a working class. We need to find a way where the enemy is one. United, we will stand like how these Sahel comrades are pursuing their struggle. But divided, we are going to suffer. With those words, comrades, thank you very much. And they're hoping that you can share your campaigns leading up to the 16th, link up with comrades from the Pan-Africanism Today and other institutions that coordinated us in terms of what is it that you'll be doing. If you want assistance, you want to invite and all that, please take us. Let's keep these festivals that we're doing. Thank you very much, comrades, and travel safely back home.